Today on Empowering Workplaces, we're thrilled to welcome Lynn Merritt, the Chief Human Resource Officer at Blue Cross Blue Shield Association. In her role, Lynn leads the development and execution of the HR strategy in support of the business strategy for the National Federation of 34 independent, community-based, and locally operated Blue Cross Blue Shield companies. She has worked in healthcare across public, private, and private equity organizations, helping to grow, acquire, maintain, and restructure with over 20 years of experience in the industry. Lynn is passionate about fostering a culture of innovation, collaboration, and diversity and inclusion at Blue Cross Blue Shield Association and across the Blue system. Her mission is to ensure the employees are engaged, motivated, and empowered to deliver high quality and affordable healthcare to their members and communities. Welcome to Empowering Workplaces, a show for anyone who wants to make work better and more fulfilling. We're your hosts, organizational psychologist Sanja Licina
and aspiring leader Guille Santana. Join us in today's inspiring conversation.
Lynn, it is an absolute pleasure to welcome you to the podcast. I am in absolute awe of your background. I love all the things that you've done, all the things you've accomplished, and really the purpose and the passion behind all of it. Before we jump into the questions, I just wanted to see if there was anything you would add to the already very impressive background that we shared with our audience about you.
I might just add, I'm also a mother of 3 amazing, wonderful children. So, which is another full-time job for those of us that are raising children at home. But yes, full-time work job and full-time mom job as well.
Oh, I love that. And thank you for adding that, because it's so often we jump in and we talk about our professional experiences. When we were talking of prior to the podcast, there's this huge life outside of the work that we do. And especially when you're a parent, I feel like that's something that there's a lot of learnings, and it really helps, bring more of our heart and passion even to work and vice versa. So thank you for sharing that. So jumping into the questions, you have this incredible role where you can shape really the lives and influence lives of so many people inside your organization. What do you enjoy the most about being CHRO at BCBSA?
I think I would frame it in 2 pieces. One is just the fortune and the opportunity I have to work alongside some amazing colleagues and an amazing team that I have. Everything we do is definitely a team-oriented and collaborative culture. And I think it's a culture that's deeply committed to ensuring that we foster a positive and inclusive workspace. I think the second piece that I really value about the association, or BCBSA, is the mission work that we do. So we are a nonprofit. What I love being part of Blue Cross Blue Shield is that we are in every community. And so the work that we do within our communities and for our community partners is just something that's also very special here.
Oh, that's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I love hearing that context, because I'm sure out of our listeners, some people are very familiar with the organization, with others might not be. And so the fact that you're such a large and impactful nonprofit, I think really helps understand the context and set the stage of your organization even better.
No, it's great. I love it.
And speaking of your role, Lynn, you're about to celebrate 3 years as CHRO. That's very exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's like children years. I feel like it goes by slow, but then it goes really fast. So.
That's a great way to describe it.
Yes.
So can you share with us, what accomplishments are you most proud of during your time at the association?
Yeah, I think I probably would highlight 3 core examples. The first is around transparency. And I know we're going to talk about trust a little bit. I think it's around driving culture change that I think is anchored in a world of trust. When I joined the association, there was a lot of employee concerns around transparency, pay equity, some of the big pieces that I think either haven't been opened to employees to understand, especially when it comes to compensation and how you pay. And I always say we don't have a dartboard that we just are randomly throwing darts to decide pay. Like, we actually have a very formulaic, comprehensive framework that is consistent to ensure that we are doing it consistently. So I would say that is one, is driving a culture change that is anchored in on trust. We've done a lot of change, including introducing new values, or values that are sticky with I statements. We've rolled out a lot of culture training. And I think we've seen some pretty big success. We actually increased our culture score. We just completed our Blue Perspective survey. We increased 5 points from our last survey last year, which again, in survey terms, 1 point movement is significant. So a 5 point movement in culture is pretty significant. I think the other is just around advancing the organization, just from processes, technology improvement, process efficiencies, and leadership, having some additional attention to manager and leadership. We're actually launching career pathing and really taking a look at all of our job structure, and putting together a whole new job architecture. So it's making the organization a little bit nervous around title and what that means for them. But I'm super excited because while it's hard work, it is work that will continue to drive transparency around career pathing and how employees can move both inside and internally in the organization, or how external employees can move in.
I was taking so many notes as you were saying that, because as I'm thinking through both from market research that we do and our clients that we talk with, you're hitting on some of the biggest challenges for organization. I mean, pay equity and all like that is, of course, one of the biggest challenges, but also career pathing, we were saying in job structure. That's something that we find pretty consistently, whether, again, it's in market research or in our clients, where organizations tend to score lower. And so our clients will ask, but what do we do? What are the expectations? How do we move the needle? And for most individuals, we want them, of course, to have the purpose and understand the mission and really embody it. But a lot of people do look at that career path, and they do want to move in their careers, and they want to make a certain amount of money, because for most people, their job is their primary source of income. And as much as, I've preached, jobs shouldn't be that tied to your identity. And a lot of times they are, because we spend so many of our waking hours working that it's really hard to really detach who we are from what we do oftentimes. So I love that you're tackling some of these big things. And I know you were mentioning, and so it's a great segue, because as you know, Question Pro is an employee listening organization. And so I had this huge smile as you were talking about your survey and moving 5 points, because of course we believe that employee voice is such a huge part in what shapes an organization. And if done effectively, if organizations can really learn a lot from it. And so you mentioned a lot of things that you're proud of that you've done that really ties into this, but taking a step back, how would you say employee listening really shapes your organizational culture? And again, you mentioned career pathing, you mentioned value, like all of these huge pillars, and you mentioned the survey. So you're quickly becoming one of my favorite humans. When you're thinking about all of that strategy coming together, how do you leverage employee voices and all of those really incredible changes that you're making?
Yeah, it's a core focus of what we do. And we do what a lot of employers do. We've got surveys, we have employee resource groups, we have feedback improvement sessions, we do listening sessions. And it's interesting because there would be 3 separate examples I would give you of where we've used effective employee listening. We did launch a 4-day workweek pilot. And I think this gets into some of the work that I'm also super proud of that I didn't mention, was around work-life balance or work-life integration, and understanding how to get comfortable talking about well-being into the workplace. And again, knowing that if you've had something happen at home, it does transfer into the workplace. And so how do we coach managers, and how do we have an organization that you can show your authentic self at work, that it is going to come in, whether employees want to believe it or managers want to believe it or not. If you've lost an animal, right, you are going to be upset. Your pet, you can't wall it off. That just isn't. So how do you then incorporate, and how do you have managers that understand and can support? So we did launch a 4-day workweek pilot, which allowed employees to come into the office 4 days a week, and they got the 5th day off. Interestingly, it was met first with a lot of distrust, as in, they're going to force this all back in. This really isn't a pilot. This is just going to be them easing the organization. So again, it gets back to, I think, building trust and consistency within the organization. And we then transform the pilot into an actual opportunity. So we still continue to have it. We have less than 20 employees that participate. So it is not a program that is widely utilized. But I think for those that are in the pilot, we use their feedback. We reshaped it. Things like we used to have the 5th day off had to be Friday. We've now left that to be an open day. So as long as it was a consistent day, they could take Monday off instead. So that's an example. We also use, as I mentioned, our employee resource groups. And they have been super helpful in shaping our benefits. One of them I mentioned, our pet families and friends. We didn't have pet insurance or any pet benefits. So we ended up partnering with an amazing company called AirVet that offers telehealth for our pets. So understanding that employees work just as much missed days for pets and vet care as they do for little ones, providing some additional services. So again, that was based on feedback. And then I'm also proud of, we implemented a different program around bereavement leave. So we renamed it a loss of a loved one and took down that it had to be parent or grandparent, and took some of those, understanding our families all look very different, and also gave some flexibility on when to use that benefit, knowing that during COVID, some people waited to have funeral services for a year after the passing of a loved one. So we allowed time to take in between and not just after the bereavement event, to allow some flexibility on how other cultures might grieve. So those were all influenced by our employee resource groups and by our employee listening.
I am nearly at a loss of words, because everything that you're saying, I feel like so many people and organizations would love to be able to do. And for a number of reasons, they have just not. And those reasons could be far and wide. But I literally have goosebumps from everything that you're saying, because I feel like you're living this in some ways, you're bringing a dream into reality that so many organizations would want to do. Is there anything, like I'm putting now myself in the shoes of our listeners, and they're thinking, how did you manage all of that? Was there anything, maybe, I don't know if it was unconventional, or sometimes I realized that it doesn't even have to be unconventional, but not enough of us try it to make it to a reality. Like, so many more organizations have brought everybody in the office. And I feel like there was this blip of 4-day work week. And in some ways that's like long gone. And I think where you're talking about being able to take the time to, honor the ones that we loved, but making that broader, like so much about what you're saying just really resonates. And I know it'll really resonate with our listeners. Are there any things that you feel like are like you could highlight that helped you bring those things to life, where maybe for like an average listener, they're thinking, I would love to do all of that, but for a reason XYZ, like I just don't see it being a reality in my organization?
I think I probably would start with one, having such an amazing CEO and supporter and having leadership support. So I think I'm just super fortunate to work for someone that also has the same value set.
Yeah.
And is also willing. I think you have to have trial and error. So some things aren't going to work. So the pilot, we didn't have a target number on it. It wasn't intended, again, to get a certain percentage. We wanted to really just create another opportunity, knowing that how we work looks different to others. So while flexibility might mean hybrid to someone, having one full day, we have a lot of our employees who are caretakers or in the sandwich generation. So they appreciated taking one day off so that they could take their parents to doctor's appointments and do that weekly and consistently. So what flexible meant for one population was not the same. So I think that's one, is just having leadership support and working in an organization that has the same value alignment. And then two, as I mentioned before, I think it's just having an amazing team. So you could have great visions, but if you don't have a team that can help you implement and execute and gather feedback and implement it, right, it's only a good story. So I feel I'm just fortunate that I've got both leadership support and a team that can mobilize.
And absolutely, like what you said about implementation, that's one of the things that we see as the hardest for organizations. A lot of times there's good ideas, but executing them is challenging. And I think what you said about the CEO, I would say that's probably one of the only consistent things I hear between organizations that have success stories like yours, is that having a true partner in the CEO and somebody that listens and cares makes a world of difference. Like, I keep asking because I'm wondering if there's going to be like something else, like some other thing. But I would say like that's definitely been a very common thread. I'll just ask you one more question about employee listening too, because it sounds like you've been able to really do a good job. And I think, from what you were saying about experimenting, that's amazing, because there's no way we're going to get it right on the first go for everything. Like we just won't. Like, that's not how the world works. And so a lot of times we even talk about the openness to experiment, the openness to learn, the openness to be vulnerable about why some things didn't work, right? Like, it's not always going to be perfect. And I think in some ways people really appreciate that. They would much rather have you try something and maybe it doesn't go according to plan than be so fearful around what's going to happen if something doesn't pan out. And so we better not do anything. Do you have somebody who's ahead of employee listening for you? Is it like somebody that wakes up and does that every day? Is there a team, or is it more like woven into different parts of the organization where everybody, in a way you have, whether it's career development or whether it's benefits, the person that's in charge of that makes that employee listening more a part of what they do day to day? Or is there somebody really going and supporting? I'm curious about that too, because again, I've seen different kinds of success between different organizations and how teams are structured to allow for effective action taking. But there's still such a huge opportunity. So again, that'll be my last question around specifically employee listening for you, but I just have to know.
Yeah, we don't have a dedicated team. We do have a culture and engagement team, but they're focused on helping to drive specifically our culture initiatives that are aligned to our corporate results. There is feedback. It's more embedded into all of what we do and making sure that as part of a continuous improvement mindset that we're capturing feedback as we go through the process. I would say sometimes it's hard, and hearing the feedback again is hard at times, that you've got to take a step back and then really understand what are the nuggets underneath here. What can you control? Because some of it we would really love to make changes. It just, given the parameters in this, we can't. But I think, again, it's just being as transparent as we can with the employees. So I think if they know the feedback is going to get used and that you're hearing it, it comes. I would say in our employee survey, we have more comments than we do employees, meaning we have of a larger ratio of a 1 comment to 1 employee. So it's a lot. It's a lot of feedback. And again, there are some days that I just have to stop reading the feedback to take a minute and then come back to it. But I'm so grateful and appreciative that employees feel comfortable enough and willing to type in their feedback and give that to us. So I feel fortunate that we do have a company culture where employee feedback is just part of the normal process. I think I have worked in other cultures where that is not the case. And so I think I'm just fortunate enough to have a culture that already existed of that.
Oh, no, that's great. And then a lot of the companies that we talk with, when they're going into more of that conversational culture, and in some ways it is a conversation no matter how you're collecting the information. And then given inflection points or decision points, it's easier to ask and get that relevant content for the point in time that you're looking for it. But you're right. And I love that you're saying, because especially now, everybody talks about AI and technologies and ways to understand, all these open-endeds. And of course, it is so incredibly helpful. And we do it ourselves because sometimes to synthesize a lot of information, it makes it more efficient. But to me, I actually run our employee survey as well. And there's something about actually reading the comments, because no technology yet can truly get the feeling. You could get the sentiment and you can get as a green or as a red, but the examples that employees bring just give such a different perspective. And something you mentioned earlier is I've realized so many times, even people with the best intentions, like we're somewhat limited with our own personal experiences. And we don't realize the types of challenges that are out there. We don't realize that each one of us can process a situation very differently. And so it's hard to create a really supportive culture based on our sentiment alone. And so being able to really hear, whether it's, reading comments and surveys or focus groups or ERGs, finding a different way to really put yourself in somebody else's shoes and understand what they need continues to give that holistic picture. And I think you're right. Also, there's so many things that we could ask our employees. It is impossible to take action on all of it. So we were actually recently at an employee listening conference in Austin, and one of the participants mentioned that also what a company asks for in a survey is very indicative about what they can prioritize and what they care about. So in a way, it's also setting that tone for the organizational culture, for the values, and being able to bridge that gap. And the one final thing I highlight, because you're giving us so much great information, is, there's definitely in our conversation that undertone of trust and transparency. And I do agree that communication is such a huge part in that, because there are always going to be things, whether it's in our professional or personal lives, that we'd love to do, but for different reasons, we just can't, whether it's bandwidth, whether it's resources. I think and you mentioned being a mom. I also think as a mom, like, oh, there's so many things I would want to do for my kids, but there are just only so many hours in the day. But also communicating that in a very caring, transparent way, I think does build that trust and gives your employees more of an understanding of how you're thinking about things, how you're prioritizing things, why you're doing the things that you're doing, and why you're also not doing some things that you wish you could, but maybe today is just not the time for it.
I agree. And I think consistency is also super important, and predictability. So I think the more you can consistently be transparent or act on that, again, it's the same thing with our children, right? So the more, again, they can see the consistency of what is allowable or not, or what the guardrails are, what you can and cannot do. I feel like it allows them an ability to give them bumpers of, right, how to behave and how to perform. I think it's similar in the workplace. You've got to have that same consistency, repeatability, and predictability. Otherwise, I think it erodes trust, and it's really hard to gain that back. And it takes time.
Yeah. And I think about the communication strategies. And I remember a long time ago, somebody making the distinction between even somebody saying, I will try to do something versus I will do something, and how much it mentally commits you. And I know we've learned even a question for in our communication strategies, sometimes we've overpromised and realize, every week on the town hall, we're going to do recognition. Every week, we're going to do this or that. But at least we've been honest with ourselves and learned, okay, we've committed to some things that we haven't been able to prioritize. So we need to be more honest and say, what can we actually do to consistently deliver on that? But then also a lot of times, especially where you were saying with communication, it's an additional commitment. It's something that you need to do intentionally. And it's not something that, 2 seconds, all of a sudden it needs to be clear, it needs to be purposeful. But it needs to work into your agenda as a priority item, like anything else in life, right? To be able to do it all the time. And so I think for organizations that are thinking and listening to this conversation and thinking about what they can do, is it's really that importance in the commitment, and then prioritizing it and seeing who else can help you. Like you were mentioning, even in your employee voices, it's not just you. And if it was just you, you could never be as effective because you wouldn't have those perspectives and you wouldn't have that support. And so for any of our listeners to think about what is it that they want to accomplish, to your point, how do they want to consistently communicate it? And what's the best way to keep themselves accountable for it? Because a lot of times, if you say, I'll do this, and 1 week you do it, or 1 month, the next month, and then something happens. And I feel like the first time usually somebody falters. And if not the first, the second, it becomes so much easier to make it an excuse that it's not going to happen again. But there's so many people watching, and you don't always realize that. You don't always realize how many people you've disappointed because maybe people are not vocal about it. But to keep that communication as a priority is so critical.
I completely agree.
So, Lynn, you've shared really, really great examples on how BCBSA, intentional listening with service and feedback and resource group really, really influences impact and builds trust. And I wanted to ask you, from your perspective, what are some of the challenges that you're seeing in the HR space right now? And how are you and your team addressing it?
Great question. I think we probably could talk all day about those. Just even talking about the employee resources groups and some of the DEI and legal challenges has been, again, particularly difficult, I would say, for our organization that really is anchored into a culture of inclusion where DEI is really important to us. What we have done is, one, we do need to be legally compliant. So again, that's an important thing. And we are a federal contractor. So making sure that we are legally able to do the work that we're doing is super important. What I would say is it doesn't change the nature of what we are doing. So we are pivoting a little bit. We're moving more towards communities and connections. We are, again, still ensuring that we've got diverse thinking, diverse workplaces, in an inclusive environment. We're a place where people can be heard. So it doesn't really change. I think maybe how we're packaging it, how we may be presenting it shifts and changes a little bit. And we'll continue to watch it to make sure that we are compliant, but it still is in the DNA and the nature of who we are. So that won't ever come out. And that's what I love about it. It's not a check off the box. DEI here is not a person's job or a function or HR's responsibility. It really is a responsibility that's threaded through all of our leaders, our managers, and our employees to make sure that we're all creating that type of culture. So I would say that's one challenge. The second one I would say is technology. And so you mentioned AI. I am a technology and change lover. So I would want to embrace and implement every tool possible. With that said, I know that, again, that's not feasible. And I'm in an organization that maybe isn't quite as change loving as I am. So I think it's finding those balances between where we can have some of those use cases or some of the business cases that can help employees understand how they could do their job faster, better. This, again, is not intended to augment staff. It is not meant to replace. So just as you mentioned, the BPS, yes, you can do an analysis, but to your point, I still read every single comment because you still lose the flavor. And when you roll it up, but there are certain things that are super helpful to run through Copilot or ChatGPT, of which they could do 100 times better than I could or we could. So I think it's finding those and then figuring out then how do you augment your time doing some of those more strategic, more impactful things. So I would highlight those two as maybe two large challenges that I think will continue to face and some of the actions that we're doing to accommodate them.
I love that. And before we wrap up, and for our leaders that are listening in, what advice would you give to those working to build trust and engagement in their organizations?
So I think we chatted a little bit about that earlier. I think transparent communication. The piece that we didn't talk about that I also think is really important is the authenticity of that. So again, you talked about being consistent, but I think you have to put some of that in your own words. You can't read the script, right? You've got to then be authentic about what that is. And otherwise, I don't think you can build the trust. So I think it's repeatability, reliability, it's consistency. And then I think it has that authenticity component to it with, I think, just recognition, appreciation, and a continuous feedback loop. So it's hard. It's a hard journey. I think it's easy to lose and hard to gain. But I think, again, it's just consistently trying to move the ball forward. Even if the ball rolls back a little bit, to your point, acknowledging it, addressing it, taking ownership for it, and then figuring out how to best move it forward.
Thank you for highlighting the authenticity part because it's actually something that doesn't come up as often. But I completely agree with you. One of the things we recently talked about also at another conference is for even HR departments to think about like what their individual brand is and how do they want to be seen? How do they want to come across? Again, keeping it true to who they are because it is so easy to see if somebody is communicating in a way that's not authentic to them. So really doing that discovery and saying, how do I want to show up? And then showing up consistently that way. And I think people really appreciate that. And it could be different styles, right? We are all different individuals. No two HR departments necessarily want to be the same or want to show up the same across organizations. But if you take a stake in who you want to be for your employees, to your point, to consistently do that, I think is really important. And to me, so for example, English is not my first language and I will make mistakes in writing. I'll make mistakes in speaking. And of course, I'll be very thoughtful about it. But I always say I would much rather that show up and truly have it be me than go into some kind of AI or have somebody ghostwrite a bunch of things for me because when they have, I can't do it because I know it's not me. And I feel like those who know me really well will know that too. And sometimes no matter how hard you work on something, if that connection, if that authenticity is not there, you will lose the trust of people. And for something that maybe wasn't even intentional, maybe it was like I was saying, for me, maybe I can be self-conscious because I'm making a grammatical mistake or maybe I accidentally used the wrong word. But I have consciously made a choice that I'll make that trade-off for people to always know that it's me showing up in all my best and all my not so best. And so hopefully, to your point, more and more HR departments will continue to have that confidence in how they show up and how they communicate that it's really, truly them.
I love that.
Lynn, I don't even know what to say. You're a gift. This conversation has been... It's just been heart-filling. I don't even know how to find other words to describe it. I think what you're doing, you're energy, like it's even palpable. Like we're not even in the same room having this conversation, but it's really coming through the screen. It's clear how sincere you are, how caring you are, and how intentional you are with all the work that you're doing. And so thank you so much for what you do, for the example that you really set to all of us in HR who are really looking to make a difference. You are a true inspiration. And first of all, so grateful for that, and so grateful for you taking the time to talk with us and our listeners today, because I know without a doubt, I'm ending this conversation with a huge smile on my face and my heart just, again, full of joy and admiration and hope, because there are people like you in this world making this kind of difference. So thank you so incredibly much for who you are and for what you do and for your time today.
And I would echo that back to you. Again, I love the energy. Again, that's authentic, right? Like we can't make that. And I know we just met even, 5 minutes before we started to record on the call. So I would say the same goes back for you and your team and your company. And my team is similar. So I'm fortunate that I've got an amazing group of people and amazing leaders that allow us really to drive the impact that we can. So thank you for your time too.
Thank you so much.